fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren.
Heard on KCPW 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren, and we got Mr. Joe Goldberg hanging around. You know, he's got his power back on. Yeah, he's in the house.
My power is on, so we can talk to Steve and not cancel. Thank you for Steve's flexibility when Comcast took my whole system down. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, you
I paid the bills, too.
Yeah, pay your bills and stop doing all that illegal contraband stuff.
What doesn't work is the cable and everything else into my house. So that's a good business model.
Oh, well, so we've got the great Steve Anderson here, all the way from Portland. So how you doing, Steve?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, it looks to me like you've been writing quite a bit here. What kind of writer do you consider yourself as?
I would say I'm dedicated and consistent. You know, I sit down, I schedule it, I do it, and I make myself do it, even if it's a pile of crap or, you know, I'm staring at the screen like we do often.
Well, so you're very structured then. You outline everything then?
That's a good question. I'm kind of an in-between. I do the kind of a rough outline, and then I become a seat-of-the-pants writer, pantser, and kind of destroy my outline as my characters, you know, get involved and tell me what to do with my fingers, which is a wonderful thing when the characters do that, as you know.
Yeah, I call that a plantser. You plan and you pants. You're a plantser.
Yeah. You can always fall back on that outline if you need to.
What if you don't wear pants? What's it called?
It's called Al Warren.
Well, so do you start with the character, or do you start with the storyline? Do you kind of have something that you're trying to tell, and you throw characters in to fit that, or do you have characters first?
Yeah, if it's part of a series, I sort of want it to be in a certain setting, era, but I can't really go there without a situation. That's really what starts it, you know, and I put my characters in there. There's that famous John le Carré quote where he said, the cat sat on the doormat is not a story, but the cat sat on the dog's doormat, that's a story. So I'm always looking for that, you know, that initial complication to set things off. And then, you know, it's off and running. You dump out a giant draft and then you rebuild it afterward.
Where does that come from for you? How's that way? So when you want to, do you have a subtext? Do you have a meaning and then you want to put it through a situation, or is it just a meaning come out of it by accident?
I put hope in that meaning comes out of it by accident. And I think, you know, after doing this for so long, I feel like I'm kind of writing toward meaning, and I have a vague sense of an ending. So hopefully that has some kind of meaning or message or change in it.
What's your relationship like with your characters, your main characters? Do you actually consider them to be friends or like family? Do you hear them? Do you see them like watching a movie? Do you have any of that experience?
Oh, that's a great question. I tend to think of them as sort of close confidants. You know, not to sound too crazy, but, you know, sometimes they share info with you, and, you know, in the middle of the night when you can't sleep or you're out on a walk. I also tend to think of them as, not to sound even crazier, but maybe a life that I would have lived in another life or could have lived. You know, there's that whole living vicariously through your characters type thing. So they're close to me, but they're not me.
But I'd imagine some of you
if that makes sense.
Some of it you must have some of you in each of the characters.
I do. I think I do. I used to deny that fact, but I think that's true. People that don't write fiction, they always want it, especially if it's based on real events or real people. They always want to know, well, who is that? Who's that based on? And I think it's more about you have these composites based on people out there in the world, but in the end, I think it's most of it is part of you, like little bits.
Well, you talked character and the idea, and then your idea is historical. You're right. A majority of your work is historical fiction, which is interesting to me. So you're creating characters who are like you, who are from World War II or 2009 or whatever. So what is it about historical fiction and the characters you build there and interact with them there that you enjoy the most? Or why do you do it?
This is great. This goes to the heart of when I started. I originally was studying history. I was a graduate student and thought I was going to go on and get my PhD and all that, and I hadn't considered fiction writing. I liked reading fiction at the time, but I got kind of fed up with academia at the same point when I was researching my master's. I was lucky enough to get a Fulbright graduate research fellowship in Munich, and spent a lot of time researching my MA, and my MA ended up being kind of frustrating because it was about the very early U.S. occupation of Germany and how did you establish law and order in a small town. So they had these, the U.S. came up with these, what were called U.S. military government detachments, and each one of them came into a county and a town or a city, and, you know, it was basically dystopian chaos, and they were tasked with reestablishing, you know, police and some kind of semblance of a government. And my master's was specifically about how did you deal with disorder and crime, like plundering and things like that. And I was reading all these reports, German reports and U.S. military government reports, and it was frustrating because there were so many things between the lines that I just couldn't get to, that no one was going to put in a report. You know, even stuff like so-and-so used to be a Nazi but isn't anymore, but he's sucking up to the U.S. military government commander and, you know, creating a new life. So a couple years after that, after I jumped out of academia, I thought I could try this as fiction. I could make things up between the lines. So I did. I really liked also being in the period with my characters. You know, it was almost like time travel in a way. So I gave it a shot, and you know, as these things go, that was my very first manuscript, and it was a giant pile of crap, I can say now, but I worked on it, and that original rough manuscript actually ended up finding its way into this current series that I'm going to talk about as the second book in the series. I realized at a much later stage that the main character in that book is actually one of the two brothers in my Kaspar Brothers series, and that's just the characters finding their way to you through all the piles of crap, basically.
That's a bad title for a book, by the way. Big Piles of Crap. That's I would not.
Yeah,
I would not name the book.
Probably would have been better than my original title. I don't even remember.
So let's talk about that series now. The Kaspar Brothers. This is book 4. You're talking about Lines of Deception. Let's premise the series first. What's it all about?
Yeah, the Kaspar Brothers series. It follows these two German-American brothers, Max and Harry Kaspar, from basically the late 30s on through to, in this latest book, 1949. The first book in the series is Max's origin story. The second one is Harry's origin story. Once we get to book 4, which is, it supposedly can read as a standalone as well, I should say, but, you know, it's always better informed if you read the whole series. In Lines of Deception, it's 1949, and Max Kaspar, after going through a ton of horrible things in the series, has finally gotten a little bit comfortable. He's always wanted to be an actor and an entertainer. He's been frustrated in that. And he's finally settled down through the help of his brother Harry, who is more American than he is and has connections. First chapter, Max gets a very creepy visit from a very creepy character who tells him his brother Harry's been kidnapped, and he needs to bring a ransom and quick. Max is smart enough to know by now that he owes a lot to Harry. He needs to do this on his own for a couple of reasons I can't give away. But so first stop, Vienna, where he's supposed to pay a ransom, and when he gets to Vienna, in the Soviet sector of Vienna, Max quickly finds out that this isn't all what it seems, and that launches off a hunt through Eastern Europe and behind the Iron Curtain in pursuit of Harry, who has his own agenda, and he's actually hunting down an American scientist who is allegedly in Soviet captivity. It's a chase, and it's a It's got a lot of twists and turns, a lot of kind of noirish things from the era. I'm a big fan of, The Third Man and those type of tales.
How do you capture that feeling, that sense of wartime behind the Iron Curtain and all that? How do you get that into the story where the reader can feel it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I been told I write with a lot of atmosphere. I try not to let that get in the way, but I love it. I love including these little details. If it's just a wall that's full of bullet holes still, or it could be anything. A house that used to belong to a Jewish family that's been taken over, by Stasi. It just depends, but I love getting that in a lot. I get a little bit obsessed by period dialogue, and I tend to overdo it, and then I'll pull back and take it out in the rewrites.
When you write the historical, you write the Kaspar brothers, are there things that you're writing about 1945, 49, etc., that are applicable today? Are you trying to make a connection to today, or is this just, not just, entertainment about this time, showing a period in time?
Joe, that's a good question. I think, I don't think about that too much, but, these themes end up revealing themselves over and over. The second book in the series, Liberated, Harry arrives as one of these military government officials in a small German town to take it over. It's almost like a Western. He's arriving as a new sheriff. And he's idealistic and wants to change the world, but he quickly finds out that, it's a bad world out there and it's gray areas, and he eventually has to end up exposing a deadly plundering and corruption racket that goes all the way up to his own American commanders, officials, which I think that story can relate to Washington, D.C. or a Western or, crime noir. So, and there's certainly stories like that today, that hard truth that's out there that some readers necessarily don't want to hear about, but, they're out there.
Well, are they good versus bad themes then, overall? So if you simplify it?
I try to have a lot of gray areas. Even with the so-called baddies, I work to give them a reason for doing what they're doing, even if it's psychotic to a normal person. I try to put the truth out there and let people judge for themselves. I hope I'm not hitting anyone over the head with anything.
And the evil, the characters, the bad in the book. When you write that, are you conscious of how you write the bad things, the killings, the murders, the violence through the book? I
tend to not go there unless there's absolute reason and unless someone's really just forced to their limit. But yeah, I do think, and especially in this period, it's always there. It's always looming. People are desperate, man. In 1949 East Germany, you got the Soviets staring down your neck, and you don't know what's going to happen with the West. And the main antagonist in Lines of Deception is definitely feeling that, and he makes some moves that are very desperate, but hopefully provides the readers with a little bit of a wild ride without giving anything away.
Wow. Are you thinking about how much action, and you're thinking about the reader as you write these stories?
That's a good question. I tend to only vaguely think about the reader too much. I tend to think of the reader is almost like this one sort of entity who likes to read my books. And honestly, it's kind of me as a reader as well, because I'm kind of writing the books that I like to read. Yeah, I think when I make choices in my writing, I'm thinking about what they want for sure. But if you think about that too much, or even try to be too commercial or look to trends, then you start to get in trouble.
Well, you've got the series. You have one coming out like now and one coming out in several months. Did you have that planned out, or was it just write this book and then what happens next, or did you know what was going to happen from this book, how the characters are going to change, what happens to them in the next book, how they got changed for this next book?
The book that's coming in July, it's a new direction for me. It's called Show Game, and it's a contemporary psychological thriller. I've written some crime noir, a novella, and a crime novel, but this is more of a broader crime novel, and I think I said set in the present day. Logline from the publisher is that a mysterious vigilante abducts powerful abusers and exposes them in a twisted show game online. So that's the premise, and I think there is a through line, though, with the characters, because I'm realizing, talking about Lines of Deception and this next book, that my characters are almost all this Eric Ambler, the espionage writer, his characters are always these sort of amateurs who get in over their heads and then figure out what they're doing. And my characters are often that way. Max Kaspar, for example, in Lines of Deception, he really just wants to be an actor and an entertainer. But because of the war and things he was forced to do, he finds out that a lot of those skills, in his case, transfer over to espionage and impersonation even. So, for example, in Max's origin story in The Losing Role, the first book in the series, he was forced into this, it's now known these days as kind of this infamous German mission during the Battle of the Bulge, where Germans were sent behind the lines to impersonate American soldiers, and they were supposedly out to kill General Eisenhower, and it was supposed to be this real dastardly and efficient operation. But I did a lot of research on it, and I'm sort of obsessed by it. And it was a complete farce and a disaster. They sent over all these Germans who could speak any kind of English. Most of them were sort of shot on the spot or killed later, and some of them made it back behind the lines. Max is one of those guys in The Losing Role, and he's using these skills that he has developed from acting in the theater to basically impersonate an American on an espionage mission and hope that his English will work well enough.
Where do you do your research for a lot of the history and stuff? Or you go through old newspapers, or what's your way of doing it?
Well, thank God for the internet. So funny, for this book, I was able to just find the most obscure things, like temporary passes that would have worked in 1949 for, an East German, there's all kinds of things online now. I used to go to the library. I used to do a lot of the, what's it called when you can have a book sent to you from another library? I can't remember the name of that.
Well, library loan?
Yeah. That, I used it a lot. It was fantastic. Once or twice I've actually hired a researcher abroad or consulted with people abroad for one of my novels, Under False Flags, which also deals with this crazy espionage operation. The German character in it had originally served on what the Germans call S-boats. They're basically E-boats, kind of like PT-109. I had no idea how these things operate. I've barely been on a boat ever. And I found a German S-boat captain and corresponded with him. And I just asked him, how do you steer these things? How does this all work? Yeah, I'll do whatever to get at it. People are always really helpful.
So when you write these books, when you do these series, what do you get out of it? Like, how does it work for you, and how does it change you?
It's a cliche, but the writing found me. I mean, I wasn't looking, certainly not looking to get rich. It's just, I just love doing it. I love the actual process. And so when I'm deep in it and the characters are working out, I feel like I'm immersed in it. And I guess it is a little bit like time travel. I just get a very unique feeling that I don't think a lot of people get in life, and I'm very lucky to have found it and to experience it.
Well, but what got you into it? Like, there's the motivation usually. Like, you can have a feeling and like writing, but to actually sit down and do it and then get it published and put out there, even if you self-publish, and sometimes, no matter what, there's usually some sort of driving force that makes you want to do that.
Alan, that's a good question. I think I'm pretty driven in a casual sort of Pacific Northwest way. When I find something that I want to do, I just stick with it. I'm often actually a little bit of a late bloomer. I was a fairly competitive soccer player as a kid, but I started really late, so I, completely dove into that. And the same with academics, actually. I didn't realize that, I had a brain that could do these things until, I was really into grad school. And I think the same is with fiction, but this time it really stuck, and it feels natural for me. And I should say, as part of that, I mean, a lot of writers know this, but you have to be willing, if you have that drive and you love the work, to make sacrifices. So, for example, when I was looking for an agent, trying to get those short stories published years ago, I dropped out of the day job. I was a copywriter, and I worked in a friend's cafe for what ended up being 7 years, just because it gave me more time to write and work and write over and over and over. And that's really the only way, you get to a point where it feels natural to you.
Well, you mentioned the short story, and I'm always fascinated by writers who do more than one thing, but to progress from shorts, maybe screenplays, short stories, graphic novels to regular novels. Did you enjoy the short story novella writing process? Is it just something that you want to do more of, or that's kind of my question. What do you find different, or why did you start that way?
I think I was just taking it sort of baby steps. I'd done this first draft, and if I could go back and remember, I think I was just taking a step back and saying, okay, let's see if I can write an actual just short story by itself. And I think it was a good training ground, but what I really found a great training ground is I started writing screenplays for a few years, which is the only other thing harder to get out there than short stories or novels. But I really enjoyed the process and how it really showed you how to think about what the reader and what the viewer is experiencing. Because, we think the reader knows what we're writing about, but they often don't know what's in our heads. It was just a really great experience in showing versus telling.
So you recommend that? Play around. Don't just focus on one thing.
I do. I think I really learned a lot from that. If I could find a way to do screenwriting today, I would still be doing it. It's just, there's only so many hours in the day. I recommend it.
When you're writing and doing these stories, who do you look for inspiration, or do you? Is there other writers, or is there something else that goes on in your life that you kind of get inspired by?
I do read a good deal of nonfiction, for some of the historical stuff, and just looking for those situations. Biographies are great for that. Right now, I'm reading an autobiography of director Samuel Fuller. It's called A Third Face. And it's fantastic, the life that guy lived. There's just tons of stuff, fodder there. There's writers I like. I tend not to read that kind of writer when I'm writing that kind of book, because I don't want to start, subconsciously borrowing from them. But John le Carré, obviously, for those gray areas. There's a writer named Alan First I like for the historical detail, and another guy named James Benn who writes a mystery series set in World War II. My agent says I'm similar writer to Martin Cruz Smith, who I think's a really great writer. I love Patricia Highsmith. She's got that way of making you want to follow these really horrible people, and seeing what they do.
I think Philip Kerr. When I think Germany and noir and Nesbitt, I think Philip Kerr, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, he was one of those guys I was reading where I was thinking, that would be great to try this out, rest in peace. But he does a really hard thing, is he injects that humor into a really dark world, and that's really tough to pull off correctly.
Yeah, the timing's got to be right.
Right.
And you can't do a joke. It has to be humor of some sort. There's that line there. What makes a good book for you then? What keeps you reading?
I do jump around a lot in my reading. Sometimes it's contemporaries. A lot of times it's period stuff. I like reading a lot of stuff from the 60s and 70s. It's a character, what they got, what they need, what they have to overcome, that kind of thing. I'm also a sucker for setting and, dialogue. I love old movies like, Sweet Smell of Success and Paths of Glory, stuff like that. I think those kind of movies are always kind of in the back of my head, and also those kind of books. I was just reading Len Deighton, if you're familiar with him. His it's great, and the Berlin game.
Yep.
I mean,
Game, Set, and Match in Mexico.
The twist in Berlin game with his wife. I mean, that's brilliant.
Are you going to try writing something out of historical fiction, something different? Do you think you'll ever go in a different way?
Yeah, I have this thing in a drawer. It is slightly historical. It's set in 1990 after the wall comes down, and it's about this its attempts to be dark humor and satire of academia. It's about this clueless academic who stumbles into this major historical find about the Nazis, and it's been in the drawer, and I brought it back out, and I thought, maybe there's something here even if I end up self-publishing it. So I'm revisiting that. And then completely off the radar is, I'm a big soccer fanatic, grew up playing the game and all that, and I have this sort of coming-of-age soccer novel set in the 1970s. It's been a pet project, and I'm playing around with that. So we'll see. But, my comfort zone is definitely in the period stuff, and then some kind of noirish crime thriller things.
Right. Kind of darker stuff for sure. So when I look at your character like Max Kaspar, do you have a particular reason why he was an actor, former actor?
Max, we're getting back a bit to the Max and Harry are both, I think, sort of parts of me so Max is the older brother, and he's one of these people. He loves life. He just likes to enjoy people and situations, and that led him to want to become not only an actor but an entertainer. He's not so much a German as sort of like a cosmopolitan Austrian Viennese type, kind of one of those continental type people. He's probably wearing an ascot or something, whereas his brother Harry thinks of himself as this American, he kind of talks in staccato American English and all that, but he's really actually more like the stereotypical Prussian German, where he's very focused and bent on a certain purpose. He's very idealistic, at least in the beginning of these stories.
How do you write it from when you have two brothers like that? Are you writing it from each point of view or a separate point of view? Like, what's your stance on your writing?
The losing role of the first book is it's all. I'm not sure if every writer should attempt this because it is somewhat unorthodox. The losing role of the first book is told in Max's point of view, and it's all his story. There's just references to his brother Harry being, back in America. And then the second book is Liberated, when Max arrives in Germany, post-war Germany. That's all Harry's story, and there's just references to Max. But the third book, they come together, and it's told in both of their point of views, and they actually reunite in 1946 war-torn Munich, and they resolve together to save this group of Ukrainian and Cossack refugees that are hiding out from the Soviets, because there was this is a real thing. At the time, the Western Allies agreed to send it back to Joseph Stalin anyone who had, originally came from the Soviet Union. And it was a really tragic thing for a couple of years, because Joe Stalin didn't want anyone touched at all by the Western world, and so a lot of these people were sent to gulags or executed on the spot and things like that. So Harry and Max joined together to save some of these refugees, and that's how Max sort of helps to rehabilitate himself in the Americans' eyes and in Harry's eyes. And then in Lines of Deception, it starts with Max's point of view, and then he, finds Harry. It stays in Max's point of view, I should say. And there's actually another character who I really need to mention. Katarina Buchholz is Harry's ex-lover from book 2, and she's a former star of German stage and screen, but unfortunately, she rose to prominence during the Nazi era, so she's now using those same skills like Max to as an actor and an entertainer in the espionage world. And I can't give too much away, but she's working for what became Israeli intelligence to sort of atone for her sins and Germany's sins, and she joins the hunt in this book for various reasons. But I wanted to mention Katarina and the women in my books, because they're often smarter than the men. I guess they have a more direct sense of what's morally right and what needs to be done, whereas the men sometimes equivocate, go back and forth a little bit. I think some of that comes from my wife Renee, who, by the way, gave me the idea for this show game book coming in July, where this vigilante abducts abusers who are getting away with what they're doing.
So you're a man hater.
Yeah. No, I love them. I love that they kind of screw up and then fix it.
You've written for a long time, but you've written a lot of different books. In some ways, historical fiction, and now you're writing contemporary and some stuff in between. How have you developed as the writer? What did you find difficult? What do you find that you need to focus on that you think other people may have the same experiences they're doing their writing thing?
That's a great question. I think part of it is just to be patient in their rewriting. Especially today, it's very easy. You know, I self-publish, and lots of people are self-publishing, as we know. And I think there's a tendency to rush it, just get it out there. And I really felt like I was a writer when I realized that, all the good writing is in the rewriting. If you're lucky enough to have an editor appreciate that they really do know what they're doing. Even if the idea they give you isn't a direct fix, it's usually a bridge to something else. So I think I used to have a little bit of imposter syndrome in that I didn't feel like I was a real writer until I realized that. And then, of course, you want to have your books out there published, which I was lucky enough to do. My agent worked for years to get me at my previous publisher. We weren't really finding a lot of readers, so I got a really a new lease on life in last year in that he found me a new publisher, and they've re-released all my books basically along with these 2 new books. So I feel super, super lucky, and I feel like I'm finally really doing it. If I could just do it all day long, it would be fantastic.
How do you get into the mindset of the Nazi characters and stuff, and that whole that whole imagery of it and stuff? Is there certain things you do? Do you wear a little uniform around the house?
No, it's a good question. I try to put myself in the context of the period and how they've been hurt, and who they need to suck up to, what they need to prove, and everyone's always got a reason. And we could talk about the current day, but we won't. There's a lot of what I used to when I was studying. I studied the period, and I studied Nazism and all that horrible stuff, and I really could never quite understand how it could happen. And as you get older and you see things happen in the real world, you realize it could happen anywhere at any time. Yeah.
Yeah, people can be driven by emotion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Quite easily, and it can overpower their thought, their intelligence, their thinking of what is.
Absolutely.
So you get into the conspiracy world, and you can start buying into things that are easier because it goes along with how you feel. So
yes, absolutely.
It's a tough thing, and it goes in waves, comes and goes. This isn't the first time, and unfortunately, it won't be the last time.
Right.
It's just going to keep on cycling. Sad. And female characters, can you get into that? How do you make it so that they are a true female? Do you know what I'm saying? The ins and outs of how a woman would act and react to certain events.
Like I was saying before, I think I just try to put myself in a different mental mindset. It's not that guys are dogs and women are cats or something, but I try to just put myself in a different mental box, and it's usually a kind of a mental outlook than anything else. And I try and stay away too much, try to describe what they're wearing or something, because I don't want to get into too many choices a woman would make, because I don't, it's not natural for me. So it's more just the way they see the world. That makes sense.
I think it's quite a feat to do that, and to do it well in that time period as well, because you're going back in time, so you got to get all the phrases done and the things that are important to people in the 40s compared to what they are now. There's so many details that you could mess up on if you don't really get into them. It's a hard process. So
it is, and I should add that I've worked as a literary translator, so translating German crime novels. So I'm a little bit of a linguistic geek. So when I'm writing these books, it's really hard not to go down to rabbit holes and look up, the etymology of a word. Like, were they using that? 1948 versus 49 or 50, and I tend to obsess about those things probably more than I should, but it's really interesting.
Someone's going, they wouldn't have said that back then. You don't know what you're talking about.
And you'll get
words on Nazis.
You'll get emails from people.
Well, it's crazy, and it's so tough. I was doing a lot of research on the Fritz Harman, that serial killer.
Butcher of Hanover.
Yeah, because I did a whole part of a series thing, and I wrote in that, and that was because I was matching Fritz Harman and what he was doing, because it was the same time as Leopold and Loeb, and it was kind of like the differences between the countries and the cities and what was going on in each place and how they reacted to the incidents of homosexual killers. It was just, so it was a really interesting process because I was getting tons of documents in German. And of course, then you translate German that's from the 20s to now, it still doesn't make sense in a lot of cases. So I had to find I found a woman that did that. I guess sort of like what you're saying. She could explain what it meant and all that. That was crazy.
Yeah, official language German is really hard to decipher, even for some Germans. And then, I don't know if you were looking at handwritten stuff, but the handwriting is indecipherable. Like, I can't.
Yeah. It was intense. That took longer than anything else for that book.
I believe it.
Just all of that back work and then making sure that you understood what they were actually saying. Because there was a detective that did a lot of writing, a lot of his journal on some of the case. Where were you?
Yeah. I wish I was available. I would have helped you out.
Yeah.
Charge double.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Let me know about the next one.
Yeah, I don't know if I can take that on anymore. I'm getting too old. Well, listen, so let's talk about how people get a hold of you. Do you have social media? Do you have website? What's the best way that readers and fans can find you?
Yeah, the first thing I will say is, if anyone Googles me, is that there's a ton of Steve Andersons out there. If I was to do this over, I would have come up with a fancy pen name, but,
it's a strange name. I don't know why. Yeah.
Yeah. Although it's weird, there's not, Steve's kind of dying out. I don't know many Steves, below 40, 45. But in any case, I do have a website, and it's closer to my full name. So it's Stephen with a PH, F as in Frederick, which is my middle name, and Anderson, S-O-N. So Stephen F. Anderson. And it's got all the stuff on there, including, I have a newsletter. It's called Underdog Stories, and I write about some of the real events in my books and writing and other things like that. And it's on Substack, if you're aware of that, but it's a free newsletter, so it's not something that you would ever have to pay for. And there's info about releases, but and I'm on all the things. I'm on I'm on Instagram and Facebook and what used to be Twitter. And I just kind of stumbled upon at the same handle for almost everything. It's Steve, the letter A, and the word writer. And I didn't really realize that it was a pun because Steve a writer and Steve a writer. But that's my common handle. Yeah, and Lines of Deception came out in March. It's paperback and ebook, but I just found out that it's coming out in audiobook pretty soon. So narrated by the great P.J. Opland, who's an actor, and he's done a bunch of...
Oh, P.J.'s my guy.
Oh, is he? He did the
Dr.
other
Dialect.
books. He's great, yeah. He did the other books in the Kaspar Brothers series.
Because he can do dialects, he can do languages.
Yeah, he can do a German accent without it sounding, like you're on Hogan's Heroes or something.
Yeah, he did Spy Devils and others. He's great.
Hogan's Heroes isn't real?
What a crazy premise.
Well, we won't touch that one. I'll get in trouble. Well, this is great. We'll put everything up on the website so people can find it real easily. And Lines of Deception is out now. And the new book comes out in July. And what's that? What's the premise of that? What's going on there?
That's called Show Game. And it's in Show Game, a self-made vigilante named Alex takes it upon themselves to capture some of society's abusers and corrupt people who are getting away with it, basically, and finds a way to put them on trial online and commit to their crimes. And I said themselves and Alex because I can't. It's a spoiler alert if I give away who the person is because there's a couple of red herrings in this one. So.
Just Joe, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
You gave it away.
I gave it away. They can find him. Well, we appreciate you being here. Book Lines of Deception, the Kaspar Brothers, and that's book 4 of 4. And Steve Anderson, thank you.
Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thanks. Great.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.